welcome back to the World Summit Power2X 2020 edition. We are particularly excited to welcome you again to discuss during this session what I'm convinced will be inspiring, thought-provoking, and informative session to look at the international dimension, what has taken place, and how we can further accelerate the Power2X deployment through concrete cases, concrete experiences, and by looking together towards the future. To chair this session, we are particularly pleased to enjoy the presence, the virtual presence of Mr. Cédric Philibert. Mr. Philibert is an associate fellow at the Energy and Climate Center of IFRI. He was a senior analyst at the IEA for 20 years. His work focuses on energy and climate issues with a focus on renewable energies for industry and transportation, and role of electrification and hydrogen in the decarbonization of the global economy. He teaches at Sciences Po Paris. Monsieur Philibert, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thanks to the organizers for inviting me and for setting up this impressive summit on Power2X, which is indeed a very interesting topic. This session, I believe, will be a great session. We have an impressive lineup of speakers. We'll look at the Power2X deployment international benchmark. So we'll go around the world to Chile, to Australia, although for the moment I'm still expecting Dr. Pinheiro to join. And we'll have European speakers, US speaker, so that will be great. Let me quickly name them. We'll have first Japan with a presentation on video by Mr. Setsuo Yushi, Senior Vice President of Hydrogen at Chiyoda. I expect he will teach us everything we need to know about liquid organic hydrogen carriers. We'll have Dr. Engineer Florian Gruschwitz, and I expect he will tell us about solutions energy solutions are deploying, in particular for maritime shipping, but maybe other things, probably with ammonia. We'll have Attilio Pigneri, if he joins us, who is the CEO and co-founder of Hydrogen to Utility, developing very interesting projects in South Australia. We'll have Mr. Trevor Brown, who is the Executive Director of the Ammonia Energy Association, industrial expert, author and publisher. His blog is to be followed if you want to understand ammonia as a fuel. We'll have Mr. Nawal El Fadil, who represents EDF in Morocco. We'll have Miss Nuria Hartmann. She will tell us everything we need to know about the Chilean development of hydrogen for the mining sectors and others, and intention to export. The Chilean roadmap was published just a few weeks ago. So I guess we'll know everything. And finally, Dr. Jens Perner, I expect from Frontier Economics, and I suspect he will share with us the result of its most recent study on the efficiency of electricity, hydrogen, and Power2X for the transport, and probably challenge some of the assumptions that I will now show you. So stay with us. It will be a tremendous experience. I'll try now to share my screen and make an introduction to all these fascinating topics. And I'm almost ready for that. Yes, I hope you can now see my screen. So let's start with what is hydrogen for? What are the most relevant areas for green hydrogen use? And in my perspective, at least, the first thing to do is to green hydrogen for its current uses, because hydrogen, before being a clean energy carrier, is dirty industrial gas, and its production from coal in China and natural gas all over the world entails emissions of carbon dioxide of over 800 million tons. That's as much as aviation or maritime themselves. So it's big, and we have to green that hydrogen that is mostly used to make chemicals such as ammonia for fertilizers, mining explosives, and others, and methanol, which has some energy uses, but is mostly a feedstock for chemical industry and plastics, etc. Now, the first use of hydrogen is refining, where it helps upgrade and clean fuels, petroleum products, more specifically. But in the forthcoming years and decades, certainly, direct iron reduction with hydrogen as a reductant, as a chemical agent, is an immense territory for green hydrogen, because it's the only way that is almost ready, that has already been experienced in the past, to decarbonize steelmaking. And steelmaking is today 7% of the emissions. And in most scenarios, this share grows as we decarbonize the power sector and the building and other sectors. And steelmaking stands out as one big, hard to decarbonize sectors. And this is where hydrogen could make a big difference. We'll also have hydrogen and or ammonia as storable or shippable fuels in power systems. Today, Japan is already seeking to import green and blue ammonia to put in its coal power plants. But in the future, all power systems that are getting close to be fully decarbonized, for those who will be based mostly on variable renewables such as solar and wind, they will need a fuel to put in balancing thermal power plants. And this fuel has to be low carbon at the end, so it will be either hydrogen or ammonia, which are basically the two only fuels that are carbon free. We'll also have ammonia as a fuel for maritime shipping and industrial furnaces, but certainly shipping is the emerging application. We'll have methanol and synthetic hydrocarbons as electrofuels and feedstocks, mostly for chemical industry feedstock, and aviation synthetic kerosene is the only available possibility to decarbonize in the short term. But all this would be only sustainable if the carbon is taken out from the air. And this can be done by mechanical means, that's direct air capture, or through the biomass and through the growth of the plants. And an interesting option is to combine this with the production of biofuels, because when you produce biofuels today, you have a lot of CO2 being produced and concentrated. Biomass has some energy in it, but it has much more carbon than energy. And so instead of extracting hydrogen from biomass, what one should do is to inject hydrogen in the process in order to have more sustainable fuels from both biomass and hydrogen. And this allows to multiply by 2, 3, up to 4 times the amount of fuels you can get from a given amount of biomass. Whatever the sustainable amount of biomass is, you can multiply the fuels by up to 4 if you add hydrogen in it. Now you have also another bunch of possible uses that are talked about, but which I'm not sure they will actually succeed. It's hydrogen, sometimes synthetic methane in gas grids, injected in gas grid, or used in trucks and other vehicles, or for industrial heat. And all of these, I think the long distance trucking is possibly the best bet, but for all others, I have lots of reservation on their use, and I will explain why. So we see, as I said, international maritime shipping already shifting towards ammonia. You see a number of studies by current registers and other. Lloyd's has been first. That means the maritime stakeholders are now working on that. In some cases, they will use ammonia in fuel cells, but fuel cells today are too small to power the big ships. And for the big ships, I think they will go into the current large-scale, two-stroke, low-speed diesel maritime engine and MAN, and now followed by Wärtsilä, are trying to find a way to modify these engines to make them run on ammonia. And one big interest of this solution is not only its efficiency, it's the fact that you can do this with existing ships, ships that are not too old for deserving refurbishing. So you can make a transition much more faster than if you only have a system that has to completely replace the production chain or even completely replace the vessels, because the vessels last long. And we have seen a number of announcements for very large container ships, for very large bulk carriers being currently under design to run on ammonia and to be launched in before 2030. My bet is that by 2030 we will already see a number of them being propelled by green ammonia, because at the same time we will produce green ammonia in various places in the world, Morocco being one of them. When it comes to aviation, which is of course very hard to electrify, you have to take into account that the fuel fraction of long-haul airliners can be up to 45% of the total weight at takeoff, which means you have to have the specific energy and the energy density for volume issues of hydrocarbons. So in theory, you could do that in the future with hydrogen. Airbus has announced a big program to develop hydrogen aircraft, but they say it takes 15 years, but then you have to qualify for commercial plane. You have to replace the fleet, and so it will never make a dent in the emissions of the aviation sector before 2050 at best. So a more handy solution is to make synthetic hydrocarbons, synthetic kerosene, and put them in the current fleet of aircrafts. With electricity, you can do very short flights, you can do auxiliary power units, taxiing, etc., but you will not fly commercial flights with electricity. Ammonia, compressed hydrogen could be used as range extender, maybe on some very small segment of the aviation market, but definitely the solution will be synthetic kerosene. Biofuels would work as well, but again, the question is how much sustainable biofuel can we produce? Today, it's 0.01% of the needs of aviation. Can we multiply this by 10,000 to go to full decarbonization? Probably not. And that's why synthetic hydrocarbons come to play. Another option, of course, for aviation is to compensate. That's the way ICAO is now doing things, compensation, but today it's very weak. It means you have to reduce emissions in other sectors, but as all other sectors will have to reduce emissions if we are to go to net zero emissions, that means ultimately compensation can only be negative emissions one way or another, DAC or BECCS, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage. This is an unescapable reality, I think. So long distance trucking, the jury is still out, and here I expect Dr. Perner will have possibly a slightly different view. The IEA is not negative on that. It shows that hydrogen fuel cells could dominate the thing for range beyond 500 kilometers or so, depending on the assumptions relative of the evolution of the cost of hydrogen and of batteries. But there is another option, of course, which is even for long range to electrify the right lane of the highways and allow the trucks to be refilled with electricity while they drive. And this is what is now experienced in Arlanda in Sweden with promising results. Efficiency matters. So let's take just a minute on space heating. Space heating with hydrogen, with an electricity to heat efficiency of about 50%. If you start with electricity, green electricity, you have electrolysis losses, then you have compression distribution losses, and you have fuel cell losses. You end up at best with 50%. This is 6 times less efficient than heat pumps with a seasonal performance factor of 3. So it's a very big difference in efficiency, and we have to keep this in mind. Propelling cars and trucks with hydrogen, again, 2.5 to 3 times more green electricity than with battery or electric roads. And here, you can see the e-fuel diesel engine vehicles, and the ratio is even worse. So yes, indeed, at the end of the day, the total cost of ownership is the most important criterion, but you have to make to procure your hydrogen in at very low cost to compensate for that big gap in efficiencies. We'll see if it's possible. My message here is that you have to direct green energy to its most effective routes to decarbonization. Because if you don't, you're not speeding up the energy transition, you're slowing it. You cannot waste it. Indeed, renewable energy efficiency, electricity, has a very large potential worldwide. The problem is not that. We could waste it in the future in a way, but we're in a run to deploy it fast enough to really control the global warming and the climate change. And this is a huge effort. If you look at the latest World Energy Outlook from the IEA, you see you have to multiply the pace of installation of solar and wind by 4 or 5 to approach net zero carbon by 2050. So you cannot waste that with inefficient uses of this electricity. I think I will go fast through this one. It has been proposed to make synthetic methane to put in the gas grids, and some have proposed to capture the CO2 from the making of ammonia to make methanation and put that in the grids. That won't be sustainable, and it will basically have the same emissions at a much simpler scheme where you still continue using natural gas, and you and you decarbonize the production of ammonia with solar and wind. This would have the same results, but cost much less and be much more efficient. Maybe you will study that graph on the presentation when you have it. Hydrogen, electrolytic hydrogen can be competitive, and here I'm showing the cost of green hydrogen based on the capacity factor of the electrolyzers, which matters because we think most of the electricity will come from variable sources such as solar and wind, although of course hydropower can play into it as well. The first thing to see on this graph is that provided you have a capacity factor that is not very low, that is 1/3, 50%, 65%, you start being good. The cost of electricity then is a major cost. It's not the cost of electrolyzers. It's the cost of electricity that matters, and therefore you can use the electrolyzers flexibly. You don't need to run them 24/7, and that's very important because if you add this to a grid, you add a big flexible load, which means it helps integrate more viable renewables in the grid. Now, what you see also is a big difference in cost if you have electricity at, say, $70 per megawatt hour, which is what you can expect in the north of Europe from offshore wind. That's where we go. Or if you have it at $30. And in fact, we're already below this with solar and wind in Chile, Australia, Morocco, and some other places. And there you can start competing with the cost of blue hydrogen, of course, but even gray hydrogen in some cases. Although these are the cost of these gray and blue hydrogen in Europe, depending on the cost of natural gas there. In the US or in the Middle East, the cost of gray and blue hydrogen would be lower, so the competition will be tough. But the renewable hydrogen costs are set to decline, and here you see that, of course, they will be as low as $1.5 or $1.6 per kilogram, let's say by 2030 or beyond. And you see here the zones where this will take place. So you see the two big countries, the US and China, they will have their own zones where they could do this. Europe well, you have the Iberian Peninsula, but even there, the conditions are not exactly as good as in Morocco on the west coast, where you have both solar and wind. In other places in North Africa, in the Middle East, in some places in India, South Africa, Chile, some Mexico and Australia. And these are the places that are best placed to manufacture large amounts of hydrogen-rich feedstock and fuel and export them. For 5 years, the Japanese have studied the idea of carriers, and I know that the first video will I suspect the first video will show the advantage of liquid organic hydrogen carriers. I'm very suspicious on the fact that carriers will work, and the Japanese in these studies, I think, have concluded that ammonia would be the best, but in fact it would be the best because in most cases you will not extract the hydrogen from the ammonia. Here I've made a comparison for cost in Europe with the same values that in the preceding graphs of shipped ammonia from, say, Morocco to Europe. So you have the cost of electricity, capex electrolyzer, ammonia, etc., etc. If you do ammonia locally in Europe, it will be more expensive, so it's worth importing. But if you extract the hydrogen, then, well, for the moment, it's quite uncertain, the cost of extraction. I guess it depends on the level of purity you need. If it's for PEM fuel cells, the level of purity is high. And the recent numbers I've seen show a very, very high cost. I don't know what the truth is. But it compares, even at best, it compares with local hydrogen production. So it's not obvious that you will use ammonia as a carrier. You will use ammonia when you need ammonia as a fuel or as a feedstock. The only thing is to pipeline. If you pipeline, and Morocco is close enough to Spain, as everybody knows, so that you can consider pipelining hydrogen from North Africa to Europe, also Algeria to Italy, or etc. This is to be considered. If you try to ship it, I think you have to forget it. And again, there is a wide range of uncertainties on the future cost of liquefaction and shipping in very expensive vessels. So my take is that seaborne exports are more likely to take place as hydrogen-rich fuels and feedstocks because they are much easier to ship and store than the hydrogen. And that means ammonia, that means methanol, that means synthetic hydrocarbon, that means hot briquetted iron, maybe, for steel making, except for North Africa, which can export hydrogen in pipelines to Europe. Another very important point is that global hydrogen demand for decarbonizing industry and long-range transports will already require large amounts, additional amounts of renewable electricity, which I could assess at 50% to 75% of total electricity generation in 2018. That is 10 times the current electricity from solar and wind. So sometimes I heard people saying, but we'll need you say this use of hydrogen is not very efficient, but we need the economies of scales to reduce the cost of hydrogen. We'll have the economies of scale. Whatever happens, we'll have the economies of scale, even if we focus hydrogen on uses where it is most efficient. Having said that, there is a newcomer, turquoise hydrogen, and I know that Trevor Brown has on his ammonia blog an excellent guest paper on the topic. It's proven at scale. It has a plant has been working near Montreal for several years. It does not generate CO2 as a waste to store, but solid carbon, and solid carbon can be valorized, for example, as carbon black. But you have to account for the slips of methane in the upstream gas industry. Still, I think it's very interesting. It preserves stranded costs in natural gas production and transport infrastructure. CH4 is easier to transport. It allows to increase more rapidly the production of low carbon hydrogen. And I would say it could be a complement to carbon capture and storage, but I see it more as an alternative to CCS. And various technologies are being developed. I will not insist. BASF in Germany, Hazel Group in Australia, TNO in the Netherlands, Gazprom in Russia, and Monolith Material are building now 2 plants in Nebraska, one for pure hydrogen and the other for ammonia. So I'm going to sum up. There is no need, no use for illusory expectations. And here I show a slide from my good friends at Sunfire. So I like very much what they're doing. Don't misunderstand me. But this slide that suggests that basically, well, we can electrify 37% of the final energy demand, and all the rest we will use liquid fuels as we do today, and they will all be based from renewables and hydrogen. No, I don't believe this. I believe electrification will go much beyond that, and the share of liquid fuel or Power-to-X fuel will be smaller because of the efficiency chain reasons. And the demand, again, for green ammonia in ships, power plants, and green kerosene for aviation will be huge and add to the demand for green electricity to run our economies. So we won't be short in demand for renewables. This was it. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I'm happy to give the floor to, I have to stop maybe sharing my screen. No, it's done apparently. And I'm happy to, well, to give the, we'll see the video sent by Mr. Setsuo Iushi from Chiyoda Corporation. It's a bit longer than expected because, well, never mind. It's will be a 15 minutes video, and after that we'll open the floor to the presenters that are online now. Thank you very much.
Dear ministers and everyone, my name is Setsuo Iuchi from Chiyoda Corporation. It is my great pleasure to speak at this World Power-to-X Summit 2020, and I would like to introduce our key technology, Spera Hydrogen, and our vision towards the realization of sustainable society. Building a global hydrogen network through Spera Hydrogen is our next fundamental challenges, and our mission is to contribute to the society to establish a global hydrogen supply chain. These are today's topics. First, I'd like to touch upon who we are. Chiyoda is a global EPC contractor established in 1948 and has designed and constructed plants all over the world in areas such as Asia Pacific, Middle East, Russia, Africa, and North America. We are proud of our reliability in constructing complicated mega-sized plants under difficult environment worldwide. Our business portfolio ranges widely from hydrocarbon energy projects such as oil refineries, petrochemical, and LNG, to pharmaceutical, environmental protection, and renewable energy projects under the philosophy of the energy and the environment in harmony. As for renewable energy projects, we build mega PVs, biomass power plants, and large-scale energy storage system. In particular, since the launch of feed-in tariffs of renewable energy in Japan 2012, we entered the business field of large-scale solar PV plants. Now, hydrogen is our new business areas in the green energy field, and it is our next mission to realize hydrogen society in the near future. Next, I will explain what kind of supply chain of hydrogen we are trying to develop. This is our basic loop of transporting and storing hydrogen. Hydrogen can be electrolysis by renewable energy, so-called green hydrogen, or byproduct or reforming or gasification of hydrocarbon, plus CCU or CCS, so-called blue hydrogen. We attach the hydrogen to toluene by catalyst, already known, to produce a chemical product called MCH, methyl cyclohexane. MCH is a stable liquid under normal pressure and temperature. It is widely used in many fields and products, and the solvent for correction fluids is one of the examples. This MCH can be transported and stored utilizing existing facilities for petroleum or chemical products. Then hydrogen can be dehydrogenated from MCH by our new catalyst for various usage, and the remaining toluene can be returned and reused for next hydrogenation. We named this new hydrogen compound Spera, a Latin word meaning hope. The compound has various features. First, it is chemically stable with minor loss even for years and for thousands of kilometers. Second, its form is a liquid under ambient temperature and pressure, which contains hydrogen 500 times bigger in volume. Third, it is similar to petroleum products, so the risk during storage and transportation is low. As you can see the picture of smelling it, it's not toxic or explosive. And lastly, we can utilize the existing facilities and logistics. With those transport and dehydrogenation breakthroughs, in May 2020, Chiyoda has realized the world's first global hydrogen supply chain demonstration project. The demonstration project is financially supported by a Japanese government organization, NEDO, and implemented by a special purpose association called AHEAD. Chiyoda constructed hydrogenation plant in Brunei Darussalam and the dehydrogenation plant in Japan. We use hydrogen produced from natural gas in Brunei Darussalam, attach it to toluene to create MCH, which we call Spera hydrogen. Carry the Spera hydrogen to Japan, which is about 5,000 kilometers away from Brunei Darussalam, dehydrogenated by utilizing Chiyoda's proprietary catalyst and used for power generation by mixing it to gas turbine power plant. The remaining toluene will be returned to Brunei Darussalam by the same ship and reused for next hydrogenation. Let me show you a short video to introduce this project.
We are committed to delivering hydrogen energy to the world to contribute to the prevention of global warming and CO2 emission reduction. Spera hydrogen has been developed with such ambitions. With the reaction of toluene, Spera hydrogen can be produced. It is handled at ambient temperature and pressure, enabling a large-scale and safe storage, transportation of hydrogen. The world's first global hydrogen supply chain, connecting Brunei Darussalam and Japan, has been realized this year, 2020. Construction of the hydrogenation plant in Brunei Darussalam started in April 2018, and the plant became operational in 2020. First, hydrogen is produced from natural gas processed at the Brunei LNG plant and then converted to MCH, a liquid compound called Spera hydrogen. Spera hydrogen is transported and shipped under ambient conditions by existing ISO containers. Using a commercial containers vessel, it's sent to the dehydrogenation plant in Toa Oil's Keihin refinery, located in the Kawasaki coastal area in Japan. This project shows the reality of global hydrogen supply chain, practically demonstrating the whole process from production and overseas transportation to the utilization of hydrogen. Based on its success, the next challenge will be to develop a commercial business that will bring hydrogen into demand and to connect global sustainable energy resources via Spera hydrogen supply chain network. Our efforts will continue to bring us closer to achieve a carbon-free, hydrogen-based society.
Spera hydrogen for the future.
Next, I'd like to introduce R&D, which we have done and we are doing. Since its establishment in 1948, Chiyoda has developed various catalysts related to the process of oil and petrochemical industries, as well as environmental protection in line with the market. Chiyoda is the largest contractor to construct industrial hydrogen production facilities for refineries in Japan. So we are familiar with hydrogen in the process of construction and maintenance of oil refineries. So we successfully developed a new catalyst related to hydrogen with high performance of dehydrogenating. We successfully developed this new catalyst at laboratory scale in 2008. We achieved a good record of 12,000 hours continuous operation while keeping optimum performance. Yield is more than 95%, and catalyst life is more than 1 year or even 2 years, which reduces the cost at low level. This is a picture of our pilot plant in Yokohama, Japan. We proved that the process worked smoothly on the scale of 50 normal cubic meters, or about 5 kilograms of hydrogen per hour, through 10,000 hours continuous operation. One important point is that the materials used to construct this plant are all conventional, such as carbon steel. We also developed a compact facility of dehydrogenation so that we can place it at fuel station for FCV. This facility can produce 30 normal cubic meters of hydrogen, which is about 3 kilograms of hydrogen per hour. But if needed, we can increase the capacity or make it more compact. This slide shows our experiment to convert renewable energy resources, such as wind power, to stable liquid, MCH, to supply buffer for stabilizing the variable or fluctuating energy sources. We proved that our process and system can manage those energy sources with flexibility and stability. Hydrogen is closely related to the CCU, carbon capture and utilization. We have various technologies for recycling or utilizing carbon dioxide for producing synthesis gas, methane, concrete, and so on. To incorporate green hydrogen into the process, we can get higher effect of decarbonization. My final points are towards the future. To make sure the hydrogen supply network to be reliable and robust, it is important to consider redundancy and sufficiency of hydrogen supply. Chiyoda's spare hydrogen can transport hydrogen globally by ship between areas without pipeline connection. Spare hydrogen can also be handled by existing infrastructure and can also store large-scale renewable energy. I will introduce 3 example projects from the next slide. This is an example of future hydrogen trade flows. Global trading of hydrogen from exporting countries to Europe, Japan, Singapore, and some other countries can be started by using spare hydrogen. Spare hydrogen is a feasible option to develop such global hydrogen network because technology is ready and it can use the existing infrastructure. We expect to start its semi-commercial operation around mid-2020s to transport clean green hydrogen between Oceania and Asia region, and I expect the network to be widely spread globally, including North Africa and Europe. We would like to introduce Singapore case. To achieve Singapore's long-term low emissions development strategy, Chiyoda, Mitsubishi, and Singaporean partners who believe that spare hydrogen could play an important role have signed an MOU in March this year towards the sustainable hydrogen economy in Singapore. The 5 Singapore companies will work closely with us to evaluate the technical and commercial feasibility of hydrogen usage to develop a business case for hydrogen import from overseas and utilization in Singapore. This also involves the research and development of technologies to accelerate cost reduction. Spare hydrogen refueling station will be in a stronger position for a larger scale and longer distance transportation such as truck and bus. There is a plan to introduce this station into global port for larger fleet, and we can expand this business in Asia, EU, USA, and other markets. To realize stable and reliable green energy society, large volume of energy storage is mandatory as a strategic reserve to secure energy supply against seasonal, annual, long-term climate variations. Spare hydrogen can store large-scale hydrogen for long-term without loss of energy and can produce hydrogen even when other energy sources are not available by some reasons. That makes Spera a realistic solution for energy security in the future. These are the points which I think crucial for the hydrogen to proliferate in the society. First, we need large volume in both supply and demand to reduce the cost by economy of scale. The Japanese government has set a goal to reduce the cost to about $3 per kilogram by 2030, and further down to $2 per kilogram onward, to be comparable with LNG. We will be able to come close to the first target of $3 by economy of scale. But in case of green hydrogen from renewable energy, we need more economic production using cost-effective renewable energy. Third, we need to continue R&D to improve or invent a new process. Fourth, each government has a big role to show vision, provide incentives, support R&D, and raise social awareness. We hope to collaborate with various entities, companies, governments, academia in the world to establish global economy of hydrogen for a sustainable future. Thank you very much for your attention.
He's not in with us today. And without further ado, I think I will give the floor now to Dr. Engineer Florian Gruschwitz to present his views. You have, well, 8 minutes, possibly including 1 or 2 clarification questions. So please, Florian, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Philibert. Please share my screen. Is this working?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, I feel very honored to participate in this very relevant event, and it's my pleasure to give you a perspective more on a global side, from the German side, also with regard on international collaboration in the field. My name is Florian Gruschwitz. I'm in the business development with a focus on Power-to-X solutions at MAN Energy Solutions. With MAN having solutions and products in all parts of the hydrogen and e-fuel value chain, from PEM electrolysis to Power-to-X reactors and Power-to-Gas EPC plants, which can be installed worldwide, or turbo machinery for infrastructure, for SNG, synthetic natural gas for H2, and CO2, which also as we have already seen, makes a certain role in the production of carbon neutral fuels. And last but not least, of course, the prime movers when it comes to ship propulsion or stationary energy generation. So this is all in the field of MAN Energy Solution product. So this topic, of course, is of utmost relevance for us. But I will today focus not on our products, but rather on our perspective from the German national side and the international cooperation potential we have here. To start with, the German National Hydrogen Strategy, which was published in the summer this year in June, is one key element for all the activities in this regard. which make a framework not only with regard to possible fundings and monetary aid to ramp up green hydrogen and e-fuel business, but it also gives the framework of target and aims which we want to reach, not only in Germany but also in the EU. So the rationale for the national hydrogen strategy clearly was to meet the climate targets for 2030, and of course also reaching the greenhouse gas or carbon neutrality by 2050. And as what I learned, there are even currently discussions to make the carbon or greenhouse gas neutrality 2050 more on a legal binding basis, not only as a vision. So this can become even more binding for the whole industry in the EU. The goals and ambitions for the national hydrogen strategy in Germany was to develop technology and markets. So to speak, the production and the usage application side. So on the one hand, the production of green fuels, green hydrogen, e-fuels, the infrastructure which is of course needed to connect the production and the application side, but also of course enabling use of green hydrogen and e-fuels in all the relevant sectors that we need to decarbonize. Another aim which was formulated in the national hydrogen strategy was also to foster the international cooperation for sustainable growth and development, which is to say that I come to that in a few moments. We see a lot of collaboration potentials with countries with a very pronounced excellent renewable energy production potential, but also of course to have a decarbonized global world and not only Germany or EU. So this is also of course part of the aiming here. And it's not only words, there are actually 38 concrete measures defined which address again both the production side as well as the application side. And from the time perspective until 2023, they're talking about starting the market ramp up, which has a certain focus on the domestic market and production and technology. And until 2030 to strengthen this market ramp up, but also to include more and more of the international component here. So when it comes to electrolysis capacity, there are 10 gigawatts until 2035 or 2040 planned, and the financing is based on the so-called economic stimulus package post-COVID with 7+2 billion euros. So how can this become a reality? The rollout, just to illustrate you also from the funding perspective. So there is a 7 billion euros money for the electrolysis, the technology production, but also the usage side, so to speak, to enable the chemical industry and the steelmaking industries to use green hydrogen to decarbonize here. And to fill the gap between the market price and the production price, which would be, of course, a lot higher at the moment when the CO2 taxation is not high enough or not sufficient. There will be some carbon contract for different, some gap-filling financial instrument in place. On the domestic side, the domestic production of green hydrogen will also be supported by abolishing surcharges, energy taxes, which are then not to be paid if you produce green hydrogen based on these. On the international partnership side, there are 2 billion to establish the before mentioned international partnerships. I come to that in a moment. When it comes also to production and the global hydrogen economy, with not only last but not least with the energy import. Important to Germany. So currently the German Federal Ministry, so the economics, the Ministry of Education, for ecology, and of course for transport and infrastructure, have concrete setups and programs in place just to get this whole thing rolling. And I just want to place a point here that you of course need low cost renewable energy cost, and the cost down in industrialization is only one part. So the cost of electricity is of course of paramount, and of course to make it comparable with a fossil fuel appropriate CO2 taxation. So just we all know this world map that the wind and solar energy potential is mostly in other parts of the world, not Germany and not Europe. So so when we look at the hydrogen we need in order to put the hydrogen infrastructure economy and the decarbonization in place in Germany, the 5+5 gigawatts of domestic hydrogen production from green sources until 2035 or 40 will only cover one fraction of the demand. So the significant gap of this green hydrogen needed means that we will still be an energy importer. So the global hydrogen market for common benefit along the whole value chain, with Germany being not only an off-taker but also a supplier of technology, we see a lot of collaboration potential. At the moment there's Australia, Morocco, of course, Saudi Arabia, Chile, beyond other countries that are in the discussion. So this is a really interesting opportunity for a global hydrogen economy, and the exact setup it's led by the German Ministry of Economics. It's called H2 Global. It's a concept which it's about to be installed to have a security and of investment and off-taker long period to establish this. And one thing to finish up now, I wanted to also to place here with a special or an important point, of course, to mention always. I think this is also part of my colleagues' contributions here, so I don't have to highlight it too much, I guess. But the point that you should not only think about hydrogen, but you should also think about other energy vectors if you want to really decarbonize quickly and implement fast. So for instance, with synthetic natural gas, which can be produced by CO2 circulation or biogeneous CO2 with methanation reactors, you are able to produce an energy vector, but also a directly usable fuel, which can be using existing transport infrastructures, ships, pipelines, liquefaction plants for LNG and ports. It's directly applicable, so no investments needed. So you can just use the existing engines, for example, as prime movers for ship propulsion with no changes at all, and become carbon neutral from today to tomorrow without any large billions and billions of investment on that side.
Thank you. So, I think we have to move to the next speaker. I'm terribly sorry, we're really short of time. If you
Thank you.
You've been speaking of discussions with Australia in particular, and our next speaker is in Australia. Mm-hmm. Sorry about that. Attilio, you have the floor to present your projects.
I'll unmute myself. Hi, nice to see everybody, and nice to see Cedric in particular. I'll quickly share my screen. Can you please confirm you can see my screen now? Perfect. Okay. As you see, I got more slides, but I'll condense this to maintain the timing. So my name is Attilio Pigneri. I'm the founder and CEO of H2U. H2U is a pure play green hydrogen infrastructure developer based in Australia. We're a growing business. We're very much focused on, on the value adding piece from renewable energy into green hydrogen, and then green hydrogen as a bridge across to many markets, and particularly green ammonia. We have a portfolio of large projects. I'll give a glimpse of that briefly. We've announced last week, together with MHI, strategic investment from Mitsubishi Heavy Industries that helps us in industrializing the solution platform that we've designed around this green hydrogen, green ammonia, industrial scale and export class projects, with key technologies which are not the electrolyzers, but the supply chain and balance of plant technologies that are so important to really realize industrial scale businesses. Florian was touching about electrolysis and the various applications. Well, the linking of that is using the right compressors, using the right digital integration platforms. So we're very pleased to be working very closely with MHI. I spoke about green ammonia as really our commercialization focus. The reason for that is that given that our interest and trajectory is really to play into the export market, and if you're on the new global trade market that will be built around green hydrogen, the Florian was describing in the context of H2 Global, but also similar initiatives in Japan. Green ammonia has got one advantage, which is the one of being able to engage with an existing market in itself, but also working towards a market which should be much, much bigger than the current ammonia trade. And in locations such as Australia, which is a net importer of ammonia, although a significant producer as well, Morocco, Chile, there's a very interesting stepping stone towards scaling up, which is the import substitution market. Morocco is a net importer of ammonia, uses that to then provide fertilizers to the world. We've got different solutions in Chile where ammonia is important to the support activities for the mining sector. Is a bit similar to what happens in Australia. Those are fairly large markets, and there is the opportunity to really establish some hubs that leverage also the abundant renewable resources to then deliver from there. In that context, we have developed a portfolio of projects in Australia and New Zealand that really cater for that. We're talking about gigawatt scale projects. They're all projects that, and I think probably is a point of difference between us and other players. They're all projects that are grid connected. We very much see a clear route to market in really deploying gigawatt scale assets eventually into the grid and supporting through that the transition of the grid to 100% renewables. In many ways, we see large-scale electrolysis plant to take the traditional role of aluminium smelters. So we need to introduce new loads that can be as flexible as the renewable resources intermittent, but exactly doing the same job that the smelters were doing in the more centralized base load world of yesteryear, where you need a load to support generation. And within that, there is one project which is Eyre Peninsula Gateway that you see depicted here. Is Werla Bands will make an announcement shortly, but basically this is the first project globally, as far as we know, to have marked the milestone to move into the FEED. We have a clear implementation trajectory, effectively closing finance within this financial year, which means June next year, and then commence construction this time next year. And the project will start with a 75 megawatt electrolysis plant, 120 tons per day ammonia, but it will grow all the way to 2,400 tons per day ammonia. And the project, as you can see here, so at the front end is the small scale design and then the industrial scale design. So we're working on with MHI and other partners to deploy, but also you see the development of an export precinct. And again, in terms of the announcements, we're joined by the MHI colleagues and the Premier of South Australia to announce work towards upgrading an existing LPG export facility to also become the wharf, but the industrial precinct hub and a terminal for future export of ammonia and liquid hydrogen. These are my contact details, but I'm happy to take questions later. Thanks, Cedric.
Thank you very much, Attilio, to be also almost on time. And I hope you will be able to develop this project as quick as you walk us through them. Now I'm happy to give the floor to Trevor Brown, who will tell us what is required to make ammonia a kind of global hydrogen-rich fuel in the coming years. Trevor, you have the floor. You're muted, Trevor. You're still muted.
Not anymore.
Good.
That's a very, very nice introduction. I'm not sure that I can really answer that question, and I'm going to try and conclude my comments in about 2.5 minutes so that we have some time for questions, which I think would be very interesting. The Ammonia Energy Association, it might surprise people other than Cedric to know we've been around for 17 years. We've been advocating for the use of ammonia as a decarbonized energy carrier since 2004. Obviously, back then it was a research and development, pre-commercial concept, and we were the hub for research institutes and academics pursuing these technologies. In the last couple of years, this has become a very, very commercial space. We relaunched in 2018 as a trade association, and you can see here the list of our, as of today, 81 members around the world. Our members are representing all aspects of the green and the low carbon ammonia energy value chain, from hydrogen and ammonia producers and the technology and engineering firms that go into the supply side, through the trading partners and the distributors, and to the end users, the technologies, the power utilities, the engine manufacturers, the fuel cell manufacturers. So we represent two things. One is the entire supply chain, and by connecting people across different sectors, we hope to be able to accelerate that transition. And we also represent a global group of corporations and developers, allowing us to connect projects in, for example, Australia with those in Europe and in the Americas. And there's a very interesting role for an association here to complement the work that is being done by the hydrogen associations, to complement the work that is already being done by the renewable energy people, to help translate the role of ammonia into this conversation. And as I say, we've been doing this for 17 years, and everybody else turned up about 2 years ago. So really, if there was one thing I wanted the audience to take away from this conversation, it is to imagine where we are on the learning curve. When it comes to ammonia, we started 2020 with a couple of green ammonia pilot projects at the scale of 5 megawatts in Norway, in Porsgrunn, that Yara was working on with Nel. Then we had a 10 megawatt project announced. Then a 20 megawatt project announced. Fertiberia got involved in Spain. We've got some things moving forward in Australia. Then we get 100 megawatts announced for a green ammonia plant in Sluiskil in the Netherlands. Now we're talking about 26 gigawatts at the Asian Renewable Energy Hub in Australia, and Fortescue comes out with a 235 gigawatt portfolio of renewables into green ammonia and green hydrogen. And that was 2020, which from every other perspective was a terrible year, right? And we've gone from 5 megawatts to 235 gigawatts. Come back next year. Let's see what happens. We're on a learning curve. So when we talk about power to X, the X is there because we've no idea where we're going as a planet. We haven't figured out the solutions yet. The maritime industry doesn't know where it's going to land. Aviation doesn't know what it's going to do. We're looking for answers really, really quickly. And 2 years ago, nobody was talking about ammonia. Today, we've gone from 5 megawatts to 235 gigawatts. And this is a very, very exciting space. And if you want to know more, the information's there. We just wrapped our 17th annual conference. All of the materials are available, archived on our website, ammoniaenergy.org, if you want to look into the ammonia part of this equation. I've already gone over time, and I've not even got to my second slide. The second slide is simply, not moving forward there, is the one point I want to make, which is that, to me, what unlocks this is certification. And this ties in exactly with what Florian is talking about. We need to be able to say to people in Germany, well, actually, we can guarantee not only a carbon intensity, but we can also guarantee a renewable origin. If you want to import ammonia into the German economy, we need to be able to say, well, this is how green it is. And if you want to import ammonia into the US economy, and the US doesn't have a renewable requirement, but does have a carbon intensity requirement, we need to be able to serve that market too. If we want to sell ammonia into a low carbon Japanese market, we need to understand what metrics they need in order that they can price the ammonia accurately. And so what the Ammonia Energy Association is leading on is driving the development of a global certification scheme. Now, this is not going to be a finished deal in 6 months. Obviously, an international scheme is going to involve probably decades of development, but low carbon ammonia is available today. If we're including a 25% reduction versus baseline as low carbon, you can have 800,000 tons tomorrow coming out of the Freeport, Texas plant based on byproduct hydrogen. If you want your 60% reduction, you can get that from the Geismar plant in Louisiana, where the process CO2 is used is sequestered as part of an enhanced oil recovery field, but it's available. We don't certify it, but it's there. And we can have hundreds of thousands of tons of this stuff marketed in a very, very short time. So that's the project, is to start developing these pilots and demonstrations of the certification of it, demonstrating the wide availability of the low carbon attributes, understanding what different markets, what the end users need in terms of metric reporting, and figuring out some of the pressure points that we're going to have to work out as an industry of what we agree with. I think I'll just leave that there, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Trevor, very much.
Thank you, Cedric.
You made an excellent point on the pace of deployment during the 2020 year, but also the point, of course, on certification is of great interest, and this is just the launch of a debate. We won't have this debate now, unfortunately. Maybe say a few things at the end if we have still a few minutes, but it's indeed a critical point. And I'm now pleased to give on the floor to Nawal El Fadi, the EDF Moroccan country manager. Nawal, you have the floor.
Can you see my presentation?
Not yet. Yeah, coming, sure.
Okay, thank you very much, President Philibert, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me. I feel honored to be invited to the World Power-to-X Summit to talk to you about Power-to-X international deployment from the perspective of EDF, based on the markets in which we operate. So, very quickly, I will talk to you about the position of H2 today, where it stands. I think Mr. Philibert already developed that point, so I will go very quickly, and then I'll go into the national strategies deployed mainly in Europe the market we know most at EDF, to boost the clean hydrogen economy and present you some ongoing projects. Can you still see my slides?
Frozen.
Yeah, please go ahead on your speech, and at some point the slides will follow you.
Okay. Hopefully, yes. So today, hydrogen is mainly consumed in heavy industry. What we call heavy is refinery, fertilizer, and methanol. I think that it works right now.
Yeah.
So what we call heavy is refinery, fertilizer, and methanol. Those three categories are consuming huge volumes. To give you an idea, it's in average more than 100 tons of hydrogen per year per plant. The light industry, such as metallurgy or semiconductors, also use hydrogen for annealing or surface treatment, thus at a much smaller volume considering the type of use. So those two categories of industries drive the demand of hydrogen that is steadily growing over the last 50 years. Today, the demand is around 75 million tons per year worldwide, and Europe represents a little more than 11%. So when we look at the production side, hydrogen is mainly produced from fossil resources. In Europe, it's more than 90% that comes from natural gas. That means that the cost of production of hydrogen is directly related to the cost of natural gas, which varies from country to country. The production cost of hydrocarbon-based hydrogen, what we call gray hydrogen, is between 1.5 and 2 euros per kilo in Europe. And blue hydrogen that includes CO2 capture is around 2.5 euros per kilo. That gives you a rough idea about today's production cost. So you have also different technologies to produce hydrogen with different levels of maturity. As you can see on this figure, the other technology that is major right now that can be in competition with steam methane reforming is water electrolysis. Electrolysis has been mainly developed for niche markets with low volumes, and that impedes this technology to decrease its capex. So there is still a huge potential to decrease its cost, and right now it's 2 to 3 times more expensive than steam methane reforming. But one of its main advantages is that it allows you to produce green hydrogen that has no or very little CO2 emission, provided that one uses renewable energy in the process. So with renewable energy more and more present in the energy mix, in many countries, such as in Morocco, and with its cost set to decline, there is a huge potential for clean hydrogen development, provided that governments implement policies and incentives for clean hydrogen economy. And as Mr. Brown said, it seems that 2020 is a great year for clean hydrogen economy. We've seen a historical position for hydrogen in EU politics, and many governments worldwide proposing hydrogen strategies with dedicated 2030 investment plans. In the EU, billions are planned to be invested, as you can see in this table. The European Union has a strong vision for clean hydrogen. It proposed to install by 2030 40 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity in European Union countries. And if the plan is followed, by 2024, clean hydrogen production should be 13 times that of today, and by 2030, it should be 130 times larger. Still, at national levels, we see that hydrogen ambition vary. We observe a leading group with countries like Austria, France, Netherlands, Germany, a fast follow group with countries like Spain, Belgium, and worldwide, we also see leading countries such as South Korea and Japan, as well as fast followers such as Morocco, that we perceive as a front-runner potential for the Power-to-X, given its high renewable energy potential, its leadership in energy transition in the region, and its geographic proximity and strong connectivity with Europe. we can also mention the fact that it has a natural off-taker with OCP, which is the biggest ammonia consumer worldwide. So across Europe, we've seen numerous low-carbon H2 projects being developed. There are 5 projects in the UK, 3 in the Netherlands, and 1 each in Germany, Sweden, Italy, and Norway. To give you some examples, you have the H-Vision that aims to produce low carbon in Rotterdam by mid-20 and continue to scale up by 2030, abating around 2.2 million tons of CO2 by 2026. Another one is Humber Zero in the UK that plans to develop a regional hydrogen production hub and decarbonize a refinery. And to be even more specific and give you some numbers, you have on the right a project called Relabor we are developing in Germany through our subsidiary Hynamix. It's in the north of Germany, a 2-step project. The first step is to decarbonize a refinery with an electrolyzer of 30 megawatts using the electricity from an offshore wind farm. And the project investment is around 100 million euros with approximately 30% German government subventions. And the second step is to increase the capacity to 700 megawatt plus with the aim to valorize the oxygen produced by the electrolysis process in a cement plant close to the refinery. And in this cement plant, we will capture the CO2, and with green hydrogen, we will form green methanol that could be used as it is, or to create green kerosene that will be used at the Hamburg airport, located 30 kilometers away, in order to decarbonize 40% of the airport. So the first step of this project has already started, and the next one is planned in 2026. And in our view, although hydrogen has significant potential across all applications, we believe that the development speed will vary from one use to the other. For us, it's clear that heavy industry is the segment that will see the biggest attraction in the coming years, and that will be open for on-site electrolysis. The electrification of mobility is also underway, and hydrogen is particularly considered for heavy mobility. If the first mass-produced hydrogen vehicles are available today, we think that the mass market would arrive within 10 years. And e-fuel is clearly also a part of the game for the future with maritime and aviation applications, but also for energy storage, as it could be the case in Morocco. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Nawal. That was quite interesting, and you gave us an excellent example of industrial ecology and circular economy with the how to abate emissions from cement, for example. And I must say I was very much online with your very last slide. But sorry, we have no time for question now. We'll rush to have our 2 last speakers speak. And the next is Madame Nuria Hartmann, environment consultant in Chile, and she will present us the Chilean roadmap, I guess. No, Madame, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Cedric. I hope you see my screen.
Yes.
Thanks to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for inviting me to participate in this interesting panel. As Cedric mentioned, I'm settled in Santiago de Chile. And last year, as an independent consultant, I participated in a project for the Energy Ministry to elaborate a proposal for the national strategy for the development of a green hydrogen market here in Chile. So I'm really happy to present a little bit of this national strategy, which was presented last month. But first of all, why we are talking about this green hydrogen market in Chile, especially, as you already heard, I think we have a very huge unexplored, non-conventional renewable energy potential. This map on the left hand is the north of Chile, where is very high potential of PV and CSP solar energy, and the right hand of the map shows the wind potential in the south. We have just onshore wind here until now, and the important point of this is that Chile's renewable potential is 70 times the current installed capacity. So we have a huge potential left to explore, which could be a very interesting possibility to explore to produce green hydrogen. Also, here is enough space available without major land using conflicts. relatively stable economic situation in comparison to other countries of this Latin American region. Chile has a clear energy legislation and also a very open market and many trade agreements also with other countries. And at least as an important factor is that here are very competitive prices, especially of solar energy in the north and wind energy in the south. So this leads to very competitive prices for the green hydrogen production. This was a study by McKinsey in charge of the Energy Ministry of Chile, which was presented last month. And this study figured out that in 2030, the green hydrogen could be produced in the north of Chile in the Atacama Desert or in the Patagonian region in the south at costs of $1.3 per kilogram green hydrogen or 1.4 in case of solar. So this would be very competitive already with gray hydrogen used in many industrial sectors. And yeah, water supply is seen not a big problem, not a big issue in this context because the country has a lot of seawater that is already desalinized because here is a strong mining industry using this seawater already today. So this led the Chilean government to develop this green hydrogen roadmap, which was launched last month, where there are two very or many ambitious targets in two waves. The first one until 2025, the country plans to have installed 5 gigawatt of electrolyzers producing green hydrogen, and some pilot projects in the two valleys I already mentioned in the north, where the solar energy is a big potential, and in the south with wind energy. And until 2030, the country plans to have 25 gigawatt of installed electrolyzers capacity. And it also is planning to be an exporter of hydrogen to respond to the demand we already mentioned that will exist in Europe and also in Asian countries. So the estimation of the Chilean government is that it could be supply 5% of the global demand of green hydrogen in 2050. But of course, this has a lot of challenges, which I could mention in the end. And the country announced $50 million of investment in the first stage to fulfill these targets. And yeah, the country also established dialogues already with Germany, as Florian already mentioned, also with South Korea, Japan, China, and Singapore. What are the main applications that are seen very promising in this context? First of all, of course, the replacement of the gray hydrogen consumed nowadays in oil refineries. Here, for example, the Chilean state-owned company ENAP is already involved in the green hydrogen project with the aim to replace their gray hydrogen consumption. Ammonia is a very promising field here. In the north, there's already established a first pilot project from the companies ENAX and ENGIE, and they are planning to produce a significant amount of green ammonia to produce especially ammonium nitrate for their production plant, which is the essential chemical for blasting processes in mining industry. So this project is starting right now in the north. And another important point in this context is the agriculture of this region. Brazil and also Argentina have a huge demand of ammonia in terms of fertilizers. So this could be an opportunity also for Chile to export ammonia to the countries of this region. The next important application field would be the mining industry, the heavy duty transport, not only mining, but also in other industrial sectors. There are also some first pilot projects where mining companies are testing kayaks are the big mining trucks. So they are testing them with fuel cells, how they are operating in field. And the break-even point is shown here with the blue lines. So the government thinks that they can accelerate this deployment of the technologies with their strategy. And these applications could be feasible already in 2025 with some pilot projects in operation. My last slide, to be very quick, is here there's a lot of information, but I wanted to show with this map is that are just a few pilot projects in the region. Just Chile launched National Development Strategy until now. Other countries like Argentina, Brazil, Also, Uruguay and Paraguay are still developing their strategies and seeing where they could define their targets. The current demand is definitely in the chemical industry, refinery, but the opportunities for the future are to decarbonize these industries, but also decarbonize the mining sector, which is not only in Chile a big sector, but also in Brazil, in Colombia, in Mexico, and in Peru. This is the aim of the region. And as we see here, we have a project in Argentina running since 2006 already. It's called HyChico, where based on wind energy, they produce green hydrogen, which is stored underground. And also in Paraguay, there was announced a project to produce biofuels based on green hydrogen by Brazil's ECB Group, the company. In Uruguay, they are also looking on replace in the transport sector trucks by fuel cells trucks. And as I already mentioned, in Chile, there's the big project in the north to produce green ammonia. And in the south, there was launched right now HIF, which is a project based on wind energy to produce synthetic fuels, whereas ENAP, the state-owned company of oil refinery, involved. Also the Italians, Enel, AME, and the German companies Siemens and Porsche. So this is just to give a short overview of what is happening in this region. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Hartmann. That was quite interesting. We could have an extensive discussion on some of the uses you've shown. I would only make one comment. In the comparison of cost, you haven't shown Morocco, Morocco, indeed, in Chile, the solar resource in the Atacama Desert is even better than in Morocco, and in Patagonia, the wind resource is even better than in Morocco. But there are 5,000 kilometers between both, while in Morocco, they're all in the same place. And so I would be curious to see, with the same assumptions relative to the cost of electrolyzers, etc., what is the cost of hydrogen in Morocco in this framework. But having said that, I turn the floor to Jens Perner, Dr. Jens Perner of Frontier Economics. Sir, you have the floor.
Okay, hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me right now. Could we just have, yes, okay, excellent. Then many thanks for inviting me to present some of our views on some subjects of the hydrogen and Power-to-X trade. I just try to share my screen. Can you see my screen now? Philip, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. 1 second, please. I have to relaunch again. Can you see the screen right now?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
Excellent. Very good. So, we have worked as Frontier Economics a lot on Power-to-X from the perspective of potential exporting countries. So, for example, also in Morocco. In the next 5 minutes roundabout, I will turn my perspective a bit into the perspective of the importing countries and what drives the potential import and what does it mean also for the political discussion on the usage of different sorts of Power-to-X products. So first of all, what are the characteristics of the countries which are importing hydrogen, green hydrogen and other Power-to-X products? And if you look into Germany, but also in Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and so on, there are some commonalities and common aspects which come into play. So the first one is all those countries have high ambitions regarding the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So carbon neutrality until 2050 and so, which puts a lot of pressure in transformation of the energy sector and of energy use in those countries. So this is the first driver. Then there's a second driver, which is quite common for those countries which are driving the imports, potential imports, which is high energy demand. So you see in all of those countries, high energy use and a quite intense industrial basis. And also a technology sector which is interested in developing those technologies. And then you have a third very important aspect, which is that those countries which are interested in the Power-to-X and importing of renewables via hydrogen and other products, is that those countries have a relatively low availability of renewables, and that the costs of those renewables are, compared to global sites, are quite high. So this, for example, holds for Germany. There's a big discussion around how much electricity can be produced from renewables in practice by wind onshore, wind offshore, how the grids could be stabilized and extended, and what the thresholds and limitations are there. And what this means for the political discussion is that there's often a very limited and short-handed conclusion, which I also heard by Cedric, and this is why he said that I might comment on some of his slides, which is that just because of the efficiency of different ways of bringing renewables to customers, some of the technologies should be preferred and others not. And this holds in some cases, but it doesn't hold in other cases. And this doesn't hold also especially for those cases which I described as potential importing countries across the world. So we have done a small study on behalf of some associations in Germany regarding the efficiency of cars driven by, on the one hand side, by battery electric vehicles, and on the other hand side by combustion engines, which use green power to liquid fuels. And what you normally see, and I also saw it on the slides, is a very conventional efficiency definition, which is very much focused on the conversion losses, which you see in the different ways of bringing the electricity to the cars. You have on the one hand side battery electric vehicles where you have electricity production, which is then directly used in the cars, maybe with a bit of storage in between. However, even the storage is often not in the calculations reflected. And then you have the other way where you have to transform the electricity to hydrogen, and then you have to convert it further. If you don't use the hydrogen but the liquid fuel, you have to convert this further via Fischer-Tropsch or methanol synthesis to liquid fuels like diesel or gasoline and so on. And then you just use it in the cars, and the cars, then the motors in the cars also have a bit of a efficiency loss. And if you have this perspective, then you come out with a efficiency comparison, which you see here on the left side of the chart, which is a conventional view on efficiency, which cites which comes to the conclusion that battery electric vehicles have efficiency of around 70% or something like that. It depends always from the detailed assumptions, and the combustion engines fueled by liquid power to liquid fuels have efficiencies of around 10 or 15 or 17% or something like that. So this is the conventional perspective, and the factor between the both is often 5 or 6 or something like that. We did a bit of a calculation where we have a different perspective, and we come to a conclusion where the efficiencies are not totally in line but broadly in line between the two technologies, which means both technologies are in similar ranges, and the factor between both technologies is 1.1, 1.3 or 1.6, which is much lower than the 5 or 6 that you see on the left-hand side. And why is this the case? Why we have this difference? So there are two factors. On the one hand side, we also take let us say the power production from renewables at different sites across the world into account. That means that a solar panel in Germany has a different load factor on production than a solar panel, for example, in Morocco or in Saudi Arabia, and the same holds for wind turbines. where the average wind turbine in Germany has much lower load factors than average wind turbines in North Africa, Morocco, Chile, and so on. So this is an important factor. And then we also included some other factors in our calculations, which is, for example, seasonal energy storage, electricity storage, which also means that you have efficiency losses, or also heating of the cars, which is also important. So that means if you take those factors into account, the perspective is different. And as I said, the main driver is the different characteristics of the sites for the renewable energies. As said, if you compare wind or solar production or wind-solar combinations in North Africa or in Argentina or Chile to what we can achieve in regions like Germany, there is a factor of more than two between the load factors in the different regions. And this obviously has an enormous impact. And the same holds if you take a different perspective. So for example, we calculated here how much capacity you need to run a car in Germany based on PV on one hand side in Morocco, for example, and on the other side in Germany, taking all the losses into account. Then we come to around 6 kilowatts or 4.7 kilowatts of capacity that you need to run this car 20,000 kilometers per year. And we have done the same calculations for wind. And you see that there is a bit of a difference between the both in the capacities you need, but not a factor of 5. And for political discussions and reasoning, obviously it's also important to take into account where those sites are located. So in Germany, we have much less sites than in other regions like North Africa or Patagonia, Chile, Argentina, and so on. And also the population density is much higher than in those countries, which means that the limitations and restrictions for building up those renewables are much lower. And this holds even more if you take other regions around the world, such as Australia and Saudi Arabia, into account. So this just puts all the efficiency debate of different technologies in a different perspective. And what it just means, it doesn't mean we shouldn't use electric vehicles. The contrary is the case. So we obviously definitely need them. But in order to assess how the mix of future technologies should be, we would plea for a technology open debate and discussion, and not exclude some of the technologies at the very beginning. And what we need for that is a mix of different factors and analysis of different factors and efficiency definition. So we have the technical efficiency on the right-hand side, the lower right-hand side. Obviously, ecological efficiency is important, CO2 emissions. Economic efficiency should be a main driver, and this also takes into account if you, for example, can use existing infrastructures, which was already highlighted during our session here, and how much the costs for the renewables are in different regions. And then we have further factors which are important for the energy consumers, like acceptance, security of supply, international cooperation, and so on. And all these factors should be taken into account when we assess which products we use for which purposes. And this could be hydrogen, this could be green electricity directly used, this could be green ammonia, this could be green methanol, this could be green kerosene, but also maybe green diesel and gasoline for some of the occasions. So this is just, let us say, a hint towards technology open approaches in the whole debate. We should make all these things available. And this is even more important if you take the perspective of the stakeholders into account, since we have a quite a unique development here. So we have the traditional stakeholders, which are important for building up the industry, like governments, research institutions, energy companies, technology developments, insurances, banks, and so on. but we also have now a number of stakeholders in the game which are new, like, for example, the industries which have to apply the energy, or the industries which produce the products which consume the energy, like the automotive industry or the aviation industry and so on. Thanks. And what you see here is that, just one sentence, that they come into this value chain, and this is a big chance for developing the industry. Sorry for being a bit too long.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jens. And first, thank you, because my colleagues always saw me as a maverick, and you made me look now like very conventional with my skepticism on some of the views. But no, you added a number of interesting insights, and that's great. And I hope your study will soon be available in English, so we can go into the detail and see if we can agree on everything. I think this session was very interesting. We are running out of time. We won't have time for debate. So I will just have the final word, which is to say we see things are going on. There will be a global trade of some hydrogen or some hydrogen-rich fuels and feedstock. Certainly ammonia will be one of them. For others, it remains to be seen. And there is still room for debate on the final uses, which ones are unavoidable and very good, and which ones are a little less in competition with other ways of decarbonizing the global economy. We'll see how things go on, and of course the debate is not closed today, but no, we are really running out of time, and I have to give the floor back to the organizers. Thank you very much to all speakers, and thank you all listeners for your attention. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman, dear speakers, for a very rich conversation with enriching diversity of perspectives. Indeed, it's a bit unfortunate that we have to cut short what has been a most fascinating conversation around a particularly important topic. I was particularly struck by the fact that we had indeed diversity in the perspectives, but we also benefited from some very positive and constructive experiences at the national level, at the regional level, and connecting those experiences together is indeed paramount to unleashing the transformational potential of Power-to-X. We will be connecting again in about 15 minutes for the next session. And once again, thank you very much, Honorable Chairman and dear speakers.